Anyways, what I wanted to get into is that what I'm really surprised by, and I think the NFL is moving in this direction, and I think we're starting to really see that, obviously, with the wide receivers coming through as well as previous players, is I think the NFL is starting to get to that point where smaller, thinner, quicker guys are going to last. And the reason why I say that is because we've seen guys in the past like Darren Sproles. It was kind of the first one to kind of fit this mold. And then you see Tariq Cohen and the Bears had a ton of success. Uh, yeah, you could say like, yeah, he got injured, but it's like his injury was on a illegal like flagged play, so that's not his fault. So what I would say though overall is it really is starting to seem like a trend in the NFL now where these smaller, quicker, thinner guys are coming to the NFL and going to be successful regardless of their size. Because it used to be a thing. It used to be a thing where you would worry about a player's injury status, injury potential, things like that, based on how thin they were. You were hoping maybe they would fill game, is the term people would use. So NFL teams are starting. What it seems like is the NFL starting to trend towards the smaller, more athletic, quicker, faster, but thinner. And, maybe the players that you would have thought would be an injured before or would be an injury prone player before are now starting to come in the NFL and be successful. We've seen this with Darren Sproles starting it out, Tariq Cohen, Tyreek Hill, all these guys. I mean, even Lamar Jackson, much thinner quarterback than most others, still being able to evade hits and everything, and as well as protecting players and everything. And the way that that's kind of gone, it's made it a lot easier for those quicker guys to kind of evade the big hit and instead take a smaller one. So, yeah. So it's just, uh, oh, thank you for joining us then.
Yeah,
Um, and yes, anything we talk about after this, again, always up on our YouTube. But anyways, so yeah, so the Heisman winner right here, 6'2", 166 pounds. Obviously, right off the bat, you're like, oh, like even the first comment says he's gonna drop. You would think that he's gonna drop, but I don't think he is. I just don't think that's the case because there's just too many ways that you could use him that wouldn't be, detrimental to his health. Like if you're going to line him up on the outside to make him just a straight up wide receiver one or whatever, it's not going to work. But if you watched Alabama play, the way that they utilized him the entire time was moving him before the snap and getting him in motion before that, or lining up in the slot where he's always facing a smaller corner and more likely of an opportunity to get open. On the move and utilize the quickness and speed and route running ability that he has. I think if that's how he's used in the NFL, he's going to be fantastic. He's going to be an electrifying player that brings a dynamic to your offense that other teams wish they had. So I don't think he's going to fall. Maybe obviously I think that the other wide receiver out of LSU, can't remember his name at the moment. He's going to be drafted first ahead of Devonta Smith. The reason why is because he is the bigger prototypical wide receiver, being 6'1", I think he's like 205 or something like that. So he's a fantastic route runner, fantastic explosibility, fantastic speed, all of the things you want to check off the list for a wide receiver. He's that. So he's going to go before Devonta Smith, but I do think Devonta Smith is going to go second in this draft. Where he's going to go, I don't know. I'd have to do another mock. Probably I'll do my final mock here. Uh, I mean, we're not going to record a podcast next week then if we're doing the draft live, I would assume, right?
what day is the trip?
Thursday.
Oh yeah, yeah. Then I wouldn't do that then.
So yeah, so I won't. So maybe I'll do a mock, and we'll just like that'll be our intro to the draft. We'll like look at the mock and then kind of see if my final decisions on the picks are going to be. But I would have him going second on the wide receiver board, even ahead of Jalen Waddle, just because I think Devonta Smith is just a better wide receiver. And then there was another wide receiver, Tutu Atwell, too, who I've really liked as far as a speedster out of Louisville. But he weighed in at, or he measured in at 5'8", 149 pounds.
Wow.
So, yeah. So small. is very small. But what I like about him is his speed, his quickness, his agility, his return ability, everything about that. And so that's kind of how I feel is that these guys are going to be successful no matter what. What do you think about this whole the NFL kind of turning into this, not NFL turning into, but NFL kind of becoming this league that's okay for these smaller, quicker, faster guys to get in there?
I the last person you were talking about, you said they were 5'8", 158 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was
Okay.
5'8", 149 pounds.
Wow. Okay. So just like compare that to Devonta Smith. Um, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I feel like, I guess intuition is that he might be more eligible to get hurt. I think it was kind of interesting that despite, I think it was what, those 4 years or 3 years at Alabama, whichever it actually was. I mean, they pretty much are an NFL team in terms of like how their dietitians and their workout rooms and stuff and everything are. And still, I think from high school, he only gained 5 pounds from that. So that's I don't even think about that.
And
Like he
yes,
just
I do want to point out real quick, Allen Robinson, for comparison, is 6'2" as well, but I think Allen Robinson weighs in the upwards of like 205 to 220 range. So yeah, so a 40-pound difference, 50-pound difference even in wide receivers. So yes, definitely undersized for sure. But yeah, I just think that like what you're saying with Alabama, what you were just saying about how he worked at Alabama. I think it's because it's how you use them. Really, is how it goes. I think like you look at Darren Sproles' career and why was Darren Sproles so successful? It's because he was used the proper way. He wasn't, Tariq Cohen last year was one of the worst uses of a player I've ever seen in my life because Tariq Cohen ran the ball several times every single game up the middle. And it just made no sense to me whatsoever because Tariq Cohen is 5'6", 170 pounds or whatever he is, 160 pounds. And does not need to be running up the middle in any capacity. But if utilized correctly, whether it be jet sweep motions and then into a route or out of the slot or out of the backfield running routes, things like that, or even running pitches and stuff like that, that's where those players that's where those players need to be used. And so, I'll let you finish. I was just addressing that real quick and trying to put that in context. Yes, 166 pounds is near 40 to 50 pounds lighter than some of the wide receivers at the same height.
yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, no, and just to address the point about yeah, the biggest of the big and the smaller, the leaner athletes will take over in the position they're not necessarily required to be. So yeah, I can see that. That seems like how they've been moving linebackers. I mean, not linemen, but linebackers. I mean, are way lighter than they used to be, right? Not as heavy as they.
Yeah,
Safeties are more quick.
yep, you're getting a lot more players coming into the league that are kind of interchangeable. So, obviously Isaiah is one of the exceptions, being how he was 6'4", 235, and as quick as he was. But it is becoming a thing where if you look at the guy from Notre Dame, I think he's only like 215, 220, somewhere in that range as far as weight goes, coming in at middle linebacker position. So it's definitely becoming a lot more athletic. And the reason why is because you have guys coming in the league that are, like a Devonta Smith who is 6'2", 166 pounds, and you're not going to be able to catch him. So it's one of those where you need the guys to be able to catch him. And so linebackers are starting to get a lot more agile as well.
Yeah. What was the other point that I wanted to point out as well? I was going with safety, linebackers later. Oh yeah, I like the idea that the NFL is like going to be cyclical and always has been. Is like as light the athletes tend to be lighter, there'll be a reversal in the trend of like the Patriots going with more of a run first offense and that being successful because and then eventually it'll pivot backwards because there's counters to that. I subscribe to that idea. I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know if that's really how it works or if it's like a permanent change, but I read about that, looked into that, and I thought that was kind of interesting. So maybe the same thing is happening again.
Yeah, I will say that I'm intrigued with the way that the offense. I love this type of offense that's been happening lately, and it's it's players getting utilized the way they should be utilized. The olden days of not too long ago, we would always say a quarterback needs to have a cannon for an arm, needs to be big. Then you look at wide receiver, you need a good wide receiver, bigger wide receiver to catch the ball, going across the middle, everything like that. You need a running back who is going to be able to be a workhorse. You need your offense line to be big. You need your defense line to be big. You need your linebackers to be good size because they need to play inside the box. You need your safety. Your strong safety needs to be a little bit bigger to deal with kind of inside the box players. Your free safety can be a little smaller. That's okay. And then corners could be smaller, but they couldn't be really under like a number one corner really couldn't be 5'10" or up or 5'10" or lower. Like that was kind of too small. You would be a slot corner. Nowadays, I mean, you look at like Jair Alexander for the Packers. He's 5'10". You look at Adoree Jackson, who he played a little bit more slot, but he could play number one. He was like 5'9", 5'10". Um, you see a lot of these guys come in the league now who are a little bit smaller that can still play outside because the game has kind of changed to where it's a little bit faster and we're really just starting to utilize players the way they should be utilized. So a guy like Tariq Cohen, for example, would never make the old NFL because he'd be too small for a running back, too small for wide receiver, and would never play. But now we see him used as a punt returner. We see him used in the slot. We see him used as a running back catching routes outside or running routes outside the backfield. That's what I really enjoy about the NFL nowadays is that players are being utilized in the way that they should be utilized. Like, for example, Kyle Pitts. He's one of my favorite prospects. He's up there with Isaiah Simmons. By the way, we were saying Isaiah Wilson. It's Isaiah Simmons.
Okay.
Isaiah Simmons coming out of the draft. He's probably one of my favorite prospects of all time. Kyle Pitts is my next favorite. Kyle Pitts is a wide receiver tight end hybrid. He should 100% be used off the line and not lined up in a traditional tight end position. What I mean by that is you should look at the offense that the Chiefs run with Kelsey. That's how he should be used. He should never be forced to line on the line unless it is for a specific reason, whether it be, he needs to block in that route because they're going power or whatever. He needs to be used as a more wide receiver tight end that will mismatch with a linebacker. That's how he should be used. That's how he's going to be used, and that's why Kyle Pitts can be so effective. He might not have been as effective 10, 15 years ago because the NFL relied more on tight ends being blocking, and then being a receiving tight end. I mean, you look at players like Jimmy Graham, Greg Olsen, they were blockers who were good receivers, and that's why they were so good in the NFL as tight ends. Now the NFL's gotten to the point now where George Kittle, Kelsey, all these guys are able to line up almost in a slot receiver position and allow them to be used the way they should be used, which is a mismatch for any linebacker that's trying to line up on them.
Yeah.
So that's really what I think about the NFL, and that's why I like this. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Do you have any extra thoughts you want to throw in there about it?
Now that pretty much that covers it up.